All right, some technical difficulties there. I had to check the time and everything. I have to do something for somebody, a little bit of good work today for someone. So I had to make sure that I had enough time. I thought I was running over, but I wasn't. And I wanted to turn the AC on. It was getting a little warm in here, kind of warming up around here. To understand something, it's what I say it is 100%. And I want you to be alarmed. I want you to be upset. I want you to freak out about what's been happening out in the world around you. I want you to realize that people in your community that you've dealt with day in and day out, to include your preachers, to include the imam, to include the Hindu priest, we'll get all the religions in there because I'm not just speaking about Christianity, have worked for intelligence agents and operators to harm people in your community, and sometimes under the color of a law operation or something related to that, such as a quote-unquote partner partner. So understand, they're using the term partner the way the Soviets used the term comrade. It's all communism. Being a conservative, as I told you years ago, is not the opposite of communism. Because you can be a liberal communist and you can be a conservative communist. And you'll find those type of battles within communist countries over the years, that the liberals and the conservatives still fought one another, even though they were all communists. State capitalists. Hey, Mitch McConnell's a state capitalist that backs China and China backs him. That's fine. I don't think Mitch McConnell is different than George Bush or different than President Trump when it comes to that. So I don't want that to be put in Mitch McConnell's face so that he freaks out and looks the other way when psychological operators go after people, including myself. We're not here to be false. I know they are. I know the deep state is. I know you are when you're part of it in the community. When you're part of the beast, you're false. You make false arguments to manipulate people. I'm sure President Trump made money off of China somewhere, unless he was similar to who I was. Now, I'll admit I buy Chinese goods because that's all I can afford. I've tried to buy things that were made in England or in the United States. I can't afford it. Now, maybe if I sold everything I had, I could buy a couple pieces of equipment that were made in England and the United States and afford it, or United Kingdom, should I say. And probably some of the parts were made in China anyway. But maybe not. So again, people in your government everywhere, everybody that's making this argument against China most likely made money off of China somehow. We're talking 23 or 4 years. And I'm sure I was beaten down for saying that we should get away from China. And I brought up the fact, I said, under Bill Clinton, I'm like, oh, what a commie. We're buying Chinese stuff. He's destroying our factory base. This is why I don't make that argument as much as I used to. I made it in the 90s. I made it in the new millennium. I said, okay, now we got George Bush in office, and I see 10 times as much China goods in Walmart as I did before. What's going on? Well, the Bushes are making money off of China. That's just the way it is. There's no other thing there for them, and they go after it. They'll go where the money is. They don't care. And right now, the money is to go against China. So what are they doing? They're owning the narrative that nobody can make any other suggestions. But the idea is that unless you say it specifically came from China today, that lab, then you're not a Republican. That's where they're going with it. Well, the Trumps weren't Republicans a few years back. I mean, the big to-do was that Ivanka and Jared had changed their party affiliation at the last minute. They can vote for their father or her father. I mean, I'm not condemning them. Let's get to reality. Let's not make the stupid arguments. Because the CIA is manipulating you to make you believe, or whatever that CIA is in your life. Could be Kroll, could be Fusion GPS, could be their new startup, it could be whatever. Is making you believe that that's the argument that wins. Because you win, right? So what do you have out there? All these people that you're using, Eric Prince, all these firms that are doing your polling and all of that. The deep state people are infused into that. They're embedded in there. And they're going to manipulate, and they're going to get rid of employees and then try to murder that employee for the rest of their life because they know that psychological operation occurred in their corporation as soon as President Trump came in to use their people. And the people that they're using now are not the people that were there when President Trump or whoever started using that firm. Now they have deep state embedded in there, and they're going to use that firm to steer the president or whoever else is using them. And no, it's not for the nation. The CIA does not work for the United States, not by a stretch of the imagination. Now, within their work, you'll find them working for the United States, but that's not the highest order of their mind. The highest order of their mind is a private corporation called the CIA that will murder anyone that a member of a criminal enterprise that they're part of says to murder. They'll just do it. It's just part of who they are. And they'll act like that's the biggest order of earth. They've got private corporations that we have had moved, nonprofit corporations that have moved as pseudo law enforcement. Theoretically, they're working a law enforcement mission, but what they're doing is they work the law enforcement mission, again, embedded with the deep state, with the beast. They'll work the law enforcement mission long enough because they're trying to stop me. They don't want me to explain this. To get credit. And then they'll go after innocent citizens using CIA techniques. And then tell you they're the same as the rest. But what you'll find is they need to have the criminal exist, or they can't point to the innocent person and say that's the same as the criminal. They're actually shopping for criminals so that they can use that profile to say that's the profile that's in this person, as they, number one, lie about who that person is. Number two, psychologically operate them to put enough in their life to say that it is. I've worked cases side by side with people that I thought were honest. They were setting me up. In law enforcement and outside law enforcement. Just to say it was something else. That's your government. The rest is an illusion. Again, the cover story. You point to the cover story for the criminality and act as though that's the mainstream reason that everything exists, or the real reason why everything exists. It's a lie. The cover story is the cover story. Law enforcement being honest is a cover story. Are there honest law enforcement officers? Of course. But saying law enforcement is honest is corrupt. To say that all lives matter or Black Lives Matter is not a political organization, is not corrupt, is a lie. So again, what are they doing? You have to pick your side, or you're on the other side. So if I'm saying that, then I'm like helping Black Lives Matter. No, I believe they're trash and defecation also. The people that run law enforcement are trash and defecation. They work for criminal enterprise. They know their people are dying. So what are they doing? An intense propaganda and psychological warfare operation. The number 2 man or something in NYP, or number 5 man, whatever he was a big deep state guy. God already told me. That's a deep state guy right there. He's dead now. Watch him play games with it. That's why he was number 5 or number 4 or whatever he was. Now, is that every one of them? No. Because sometimes you have a level-headed deep state person, they keep their Daniels around. See, I was a Daniel. But they allowed the defecation to murder me. Or attempt to murder me, at least. There was a time when you could work and be honest and try hard, and not that they would give you anything, but they wouldn't bother you. I was telling, I think my brother the other day, it came up, I was working, and I'd been working for 10 years, and I had been, just tortured the whole time trying to do the work, the extra work that I was doing that other people didn't have to do, and that people after me got to do as a full-time position. But it was kind of like, when you get time, you do it. And I figure, okay, I'll pay my dues. But I pay my dues just to pay my dues. I'm not doing anything to get promoted. But I had somebody who spends 2 hours in a fitness room every day of the week, just about, exercising during the day on the clock, yell at me because he was stressed over something that I'm going to be going to headquarters soon and be a bigwig. And like I didn't earn it. I said to him, I said, if I wanted that, I could have had that probably 2 years ago, but I'm not even focusing on that. I'm trying to save my life. I mean, and the CIA had already been trying to kill me, so that person was probably being worked against me. There are people that work in your agencies today that work with CIA people to assassinate your fellow employees and try to bring you along with it. And some of you know because you've taken it and you are that thing. You are that criminal. You are that communist. It's communism, all of you. What happened is Hansen of the FBI was only one of many. Some people get paid simply by the machine instead of directly like Hansen did. Hansen provided information. What happens with the machine, it will take care of your life if you do it at once, and you may never ever speak to the machine. But you know that the machine, and it's physical. They're sending internet messages, coded messages, that they teach the code, and the person gets the inference. And they send, like I said, people that act out pantomimes and say certain things around you to guide you. Now, can Satan do that? Of course. So it's confusing where it is and where Satan's doing it. So what I'm telling you that the deep state, that your CIA members, your FBI, your Marshal Service, your Customs, your ATF, whoever they are today, are working with Satan and the beast. So you'll have it come up. I mean, it takes a lot to figure this out. You'll have it come up a lot of different places, and they won't be there. And they know that, and they take advantage of that. But the nature of psychological warfare would cause that anyway. You would see it places that it wasn't, because that's what psychological warfare is. And the reason they keep revisiting my life is because I keep restarting my life. Now, you have to understand, everything that's happening to you based upon COVID-19 bad has happened to me over the last 25 years at the hands of the deep state shadow government criminal enterprise. It's murdered people. And you got these people in these private sector corporations, nonprofits, supposedly working a law enforcement mission. But they only do it so far as to get the credibility, and then they go off on their CIA work. And that CIA being a private corporation that doesn't care about this nation. You see it. There's not a single deep state person promised riches that wouldn't go along with a COVID-19 operation while they were in the middle of it. Now, once it happens, they may freak out over what they did, because that's the nature of their beast. They'll try to murder somebody and freak out about it, and then they're in for life because they tried to murder the person. Or they cause somebody to commit a crime, like the mass shooters. The Las Vegas shooter was most likely created by psychological operation. Most likely he was drugged. Does it look like mental illness? Of course. Psychological torture and psychological operation is based upon anti-clinical science, clinical psychology, should I say, and science, because they're using drugs and things like that, and substances that would be defined as scientific substances and mechanisms outside of psychology. I mean, if they can get their hands on some ultrasonic device that makes people freak out, they'll use it. They'll get near them close enough, or install an event in their home if they do work in that home, if they get one of their people in close enough. Turn on the ultrasonic device when they drive by, or however it works. Or it could be its own internet connection. There's nothing beyond them. What they're trying to tell you in your mind and in your life is that they're honorable, that they use this and they're the bad of the bad because they have to take out bad people. They're lying. There could be somebody out there like that. May have been once upon a time in their life, but it's not today, and it's not them. They're creating criminals. They're creating events where you would hand over all your power. COVID-19 happened. Somebody could have caused a contamination. Somebody could have sabotaged the lab. The lab could have had an accident. Could be anything. But you have to buy into what they say today or you're a Democrat. I mean, can you see it coming? But you know the reality is they're Democrats. They really are. They're not Republicans. I told you this before. They're communists. They're conservative communists. But they're making you believe that somebody's trying to take your freedom while they're trying to protect you, but it's not President Trump. Not President Trump, it's everyone else. It's Fauci and Gates. I mean, come on. Is Gates trying to take advantage of this? Of course. Taking advantage of a lot of things in his life. But it doesn't mean that other people haven't. Every business person out there today, somewhere in their life, probably took advantage of a situation. Whether they're proud of it or not is the question, I guess. Because it tends to be a dog-eat-dog world. So again, they're hyper-focusing you on Gates and Fauci because that works for what they're trying to do, and they're trying to psychologically manipulate the president against Fauci and BRICS. Because they don't want you to think that you're ever in danger. They don't want you to think that they saved your life, your loved one's life. There are so many factors involved in figuring out how many people would have died that simply waiting a week, holding off contamination, infection for a week of people, and that happened for sure, can make a massive change in the organism enough to save 100,000 people. It's just that simple. It's like the same thing as going over to Iraq and not finding chemical weapons. It didn't mean that it didn't exist or couldn't exist. We just never found it. I don't think it was related solely to bad blood between Iraq and the Bushes, albeit the Bushes sold me out. But I don't think, that article's out there, but his take is somewhat valid, but there was more going on than that. Was it a little bit of colonialism? Yes, that too. They're trying to figure out how to stop what had been going on for decades. They wanted to bring peace to that area, and unfortunately we had to go through some combat operation. But what happened is the deep state took over the government at the same time. You can't have both. You can't have two masters. Mammon. The thing is serving Mammon, and I got to get into finishing that teaching. Mammon is considered money. In ancient Judaism, it had a neutral connotation. But by the time Rabbi Jesus came along, money was being used so corruptly because Rome had taken over the area that Mammon became synonymous with corrupt use of money. And the worship of money. And it says serving two masters. Jesus, in that scripture, has money. He pays for something, I think, in the scripture. I have to go back through it, but if I'm not mistaken, he actually, and that's God's doing, Jesus has money in his hand, and he paid somebody. So again, it wasn't written ignorantly, it's received ignorantly. So Jesus had money in his hand, paid somebody for a service. And in that same scripture, it says that, you shouldn't take script with you. You shouldn't take money with you. So again, what is God doing in all of that? But it's obvious with COVID-19, God wants you to wake up of it. But what they're doing is causing you to sleep again, making you believe that there's no reason to have ever thought that it would be anything. And then that one poor guy, I just can't believe he bought into it, was out there, made some videos about how it was a hoax and a fake. And they're using the term hoax because they want to make the president afraid to go down that avenue or allow that avenue of discussion. because the president said hoax about something else. Again, it's a psychological propaganda operation. But that man was saying that, and within a week he was dead or something like that of making that video. He just actually, boom, that was it. He caught it like in a day or two. Or actually already had it probably when he made the video. And then because his family was there with him, they said it never happened. I mean, it's so disgusting that they would say that. Because at that point, because there was PPE picking up, they would allow the family to suit up and be with the loved one at that point. And not every hospital, but certain hospitals. So again, it can kill you, even if you're healthy. We have tons of Navajo people being taken at a younger age. I do believe that that is the killer strain that found their community. I mean, we're getting into this, whatever argument somebody has, they're using. Okay, that's inequality. Well, I don't know how unequal it is. They're medevacing these people from their chosen place of living, the reservation, because they don't have medical care. They're putting them in places that have that medical care for them. They're not going cheap. New Mexico has said, and Arizona has said, if you don't have medical care, we're going to fly you, we're going to drive you to medical care. So again, I don't think it's a discrimination. Is it a discrimination before that not to have that medical care? Well, there are poor areas within the United States that are not Native American, and they suffer in a similar manner. I mean, it's not the middle of the city. If you move to the middle of the city, there's no way that you wouldn't have medical care. And not everybody that's Native American in New Mexico is poor. So again, I've explained that one, where you have your leaders who are very wealthy and very political, telling you to focus on somebody else, not them. But yet, they're driving around in a nice car, big house, flying around the world on your dime. Or with a dime they could give to you. Again, the same thing we see going on in the arguments around COVID-19, not only Native American. And God's got to wake you up. He's got to shock you because they shocked you into sleeping. They tried to extort you, and you did what they wanted. My own brother sold me out. My own brother did whatever they wanted for a little while. And he even agreed they exist. I had conversations with him that they exist. And he believes they're necessary. See, that's what they'll do for the people that they give money to. And they try to make that argument to the person they're harming. You brought this on yourself. Why are we here? I mean, this is who they are. No good to give. No good to give at all. Not a single one of them. Because they're taking away from the person that could have had that position and wouldn't have worked the deep state activity, would have actually made sure you were safe. I doubt COVID-19 would even be here. Remember, Nixon was taken out by the deep state. They hate China. They do not want peace with China. They don't want peace with South Korea and North Korea. They don't want peace there. They're trying to lure Kim out so they can COVID-19 him to death. Theoretically, they already got some of his bodyguards. It could be a by chance infection, maybe not. So we got CNN trying to lure Kim out so somebody can kill him with COVID-19. And what do we know about CNN? What do we know about the federal agents and prior CIA that worked for CNN? What do we know about Roger Stone, CNN, and that arrest? Private corporation. FBI's private corporation. They're not trying to help this nation. They're trying to help you out of everything you got and force you to worship them if you want to stay on the right side of making any money. They're doing buying and selling. They're stopping buying and selling, and they're promoting buying and selling where they want and how they want, based upon what Satan speaks into their mind. The only question is, How many vials did they use on Rand? They want to get rid of Rand. I'm sure they do. He hurts their bottom line. They're embezzling. Every time we go to war, we can't win because we've got devils like the CIA and the FBI and all the rest stealing power, using it against innocent people, whatever the theory and investigative process is, and then embezzling from the funding. I mean, we're supposed to believe that it's just an accounting error, trillions of dollars. Oh, accounting error. I mean, how can an FBI person even put their badge on in the morning? I mean, come on. They're embezzling money. The nonprofits embezzle money for the Democrats, and the military and law enforcement machine embezzles money for the Republicans. And then there's a little bit of mix in between. Some of the nonprofit money goes to Republicans. Some of the military and law enforcement money goes to Democrats. Embezzlement. Rand Paul doesn't give them enough money to spread around for their criminal enterprise. Now, did that happen? I don't know. Could have. And when that pressure hits Rand, they'll start hitting his head with, maybe you should have gave us a bigger budget. Because they're wired to Satan. COVID-19's a demon. If it attacks you, Satan starts speaking. And Satan speaks for the FBI, CIA, Marshal Service, Customs Border Patrol. Yeah, it does a good job, but it's not everybody. Some of them are criminals too. I mean, you can't get into that paintbrush thinking that the CIA's been programming you for, or programming you with or for or whatever it is. Or maybe both. So what it is, I have to stick my face right up to the microphone. Oh no, it's got COVID-19. Rand's in my head now. I don't know if he got the thought. Which means Rand might not know he's in my head, but he received the thought. Maybe a joke or something. If you get a thought in your head, sometimes it's other people. That's how the seer world works. Remember, we're all connected through God. I don't always agree with Rand. I don't always agree with Ron Paul, but, they were right. They're within a certain level. When you go after TSA so hard, I couldn't agree with them. The TSA is one of the hardest jobs in government. It really isn't a full law enforcement job. Nobody respects you, and you've got to, try to keep people safe. Now, have people done the wrong thing in TSA? Of course. I mean, it's the same thing as every other agency. But I fought Ron and Rand pretty hard when they were trying to diss TSA. I'm probably the only one. Same reason, people making money off of China, I'm dissing it. But you know what? I also said that Nixon, let's go back to what I was saying. I kind of missed the beat there. Nixon was taking money from their machine by trying to make peace with China. Nixon was taking power from their machine trying to make peace with China. If they had not done that to Nixon, they operated Nixon. I could look at Nixon and say he was at a minimum psychologically operated, and most likely, based upon the time frame and the way he looked in that interview, he was drugged and psychologically operated. They used MK Ultra, something like MK Ultra on Nixon. And that's why that happened. Probably used it on Liddy. And in that, we lost our ability to make peace with China. So when you wonder why this is happening, go back to the 70s. Richard Nixon, if he could have stayed in office, because they trusted Nixon. Do you understand that? Nixon's not deep state. So when a Chinese leader thinks about Nixon, he has happy thoughts. And there's no deception that gets him later for false happy thoughts. They knew Nixon was honorable. So they were going to try to do something with him, see if they could make it happen. And it had been easier back then than it is today. Or all along, quite frankly. So again, when capitalism came to China, I didn't think it was completely bad once it took root. I said, well, if we use this for the good, and that's what Fauci was doing, trying to use it for the good, saying, hey, let's get with them and finance something. And, you know, it wasn't $3 million. I don't know how much it was. It's probably much smaller. But we always try to work with our enemies to a certain degree on a medical issue or something. Even the president said to Iran, hey, if you need help, we're here. Well, they didn't want anything to do with this, but the president did say, hey, if you need help, we're here. We're ready to serve. So again, we do that to help ourselves sometimes also. You know, to contain the outbreak, we needed to help Iran. So if it, you know, it was still nice, we didn't have to do that. So again, it's the same thing with China. So again, where President Obama was wrong, he was wrong. Where he wasn't wrong, he wasn't wrong. I don't believe it was, if it was 3-point-something million, that could be scary, but I don't think it was that much. Do I think Biden and the President Obama were right in everything they did with China? No. But we're not going to sit here and say Fauci and Gates are trying to take over the world, because what they're trying to do is get you away from the real reason that we should investigate outside the lab. And that would be that a psychological operator lost his mind, or a group of them lost their mind and caused an event that would shift the mind away from investigating them. And what happens is, I've had this happen to me forever. You know, God's been going through all the moments. So I got real sick in the Marshal Service for 2 months. But what I didn't realize is that they were already looking at me. And when I would go online and I would look up my illness and all that, they cursed me to freak out and to be freaked out about it. And I can point, going back after God woke me up and told me how it all works. I didn't know then. Although I think I did suspect something at that point, because is the CIA doing this to me? Because that news article I read doesn't make any sense. And now I can't find it. So again, they'll do your database and your data search and try to put false information in. But I know that they were doing that. So again, when Rand Paul comes down with it, they start cursing his mind, saying you shouldn't have taken our money. You should have let us fight that war. You should have let us do this. And that's what happens. So again, there's a reality. The Trumps being Democrat for so many years doesn't mean anything, really. But it's a truth. And the Democrats, you know, come and go in life. So it doesn't mean that, you know, quite frankly, I, by default, had to use a Democrat senator to get my retirement going after they tried to corruptly and criminally hide it and make sure that it didn't go anywhere. They wouldn't forward it. So again, if it went for Senator Lautenberg, I wouldn't be, you know, so comfortable. I wouldn't have had anything. So again, it's a crazy world. I don't know if it's going to get any better. Quite frankly, it might end. I've been telling you that for years. I haven't told you that this was going to come. I told you this was going to come. Nobody else did. No other preacher says it the way I say it. Nobody was as exact. I didn't even know how exact I was. Because God just say this, I say that. God just say this, I say that. That's just the way it is. And then in the end, it all fits together, and God said, okay, let's see how they handle you being my person now. Oh, it was all Satan. And it really wasn't that. It's something else. They're just trying to change the narrative of what it is and what could have happened. What skewed, and again, going back, what skewed a lot of the figures was how corrupt the beginning was. There were so many things that were out of the norm in the initial outbreak that it appeared worse than it was. Although it could have been worse than it was. But again, we have people in New York saying party hardy instead of protect yourself. We had spring break going on. That type of thing is below the baseline activity. So you have a baseline where people are normal, level-headed. They're not doing spring break. They're just living a normal life. They're not being told to go out and party. They're taking their precautions. They're washing their hands. They're doing what they're supposed to. And then there's the world where you're sub that baseline. So we started really below the baseline where Fauci thought we were. Now, are the models skewed? Yes and no. We don't know for sure. Now, saying that it only has a 2%, say, mortality rate is deceptive also. If everybody in the world gets it and it has a 2% mortality rate, that's pretty high. If 25% of the world gets it and only has 2% mortality rate, it's much lower. So you see? So again, they're using statistics that don't get anywhere, that don't get you anywhere. And they're using statistics of how it worked. And of course, your favorite Democrat governor to hate said, well, I don't know what's wrong with everyone. We wanted to deaths and decrease the spread, and we did that. And you're trying to say that there's something wrong with it, that's the total figure? No, it wouldn't have been a total figure. Even the percentage doesn't work that way. So to say that, all these people have it and the mortality rate's low is not the be-all of how many people would be killed. Because if we did nothing, everybody might have it. And then the mortality rate, and then once the mortality rate and the serious case rate gets above a certain point, then New York only had a small sliver of what they would have gotten. That wasn't even full brunt in New York, and they were burying people in big fields. That's not normal for New York. So again, try to focus on the reality instead of what the talking points are. Because to me, it looks like some of the Chinese are trying to scuttle our ability to take it head on and discredit what we've done. You can't credit the president with doing the right thing and then say Fauci gave him false information. The president is supposed to be able to manage and act on the information provided. I don't believe the information was as false as it appears at first blush, based upon how it would have progressed. And that's looking at the isolated outbreaks such as the Navajo, how quickly that happened, and what the mortality rate is appearing over there. And when I say mortality rate, it's also the demographics of the mortality. That's another issue. So again, it's not a linear equation. You can't just sit there and do basic computation of what has happened and say that's where we would have been times 1,000 people or times 10,000 people, whatever it is you want to say it would have been. So if we go back to that original part of how this was happening, we had spring break. Okay, everybody go back to school. Everybody goes back to school after spring break. What would have happened there? So again, you're way off base in how you're all figuring this. And if you don't like when I yell at you, the only thing I don't like about yelling at you, my microphone's not prepared for that high of volume. If I had my ribbon mic, it would have worked. It has a higher ceiling. So I actually wish I had my ribbon mics right now because I'm in a place where I can use them. Much quieter in here. But I got to do something to wake you all up. It's horrendous what they're doing. 25 years. You all can't fathom it. I can feel your minds are blocked from it. Over 2 decades of torture. Whenever they felt like it. Oh, yeah, sometimes they're restricted, but whenever they felt like it, they're going to get to it eventually. Sexualization, radicalization. I got to bring up all those posts and start putting them out again. Do you understand how it happens? New Mexico State Police are part of it. I already told you that. Santa Fe PD was part of it. I already told you that. Now, did I ever act out against Santa Fe PD or New Mexico State Police? No, I've helped them on many occasions. Just being in the community helps them. Gains respect for law enforcement, gains respect for other things also. I've instructed people in a lot of things. Have they acted out against me? Yeah, of course. They ruined my life. They enjoyed it. Same thing as Naples PD. And Fidley, the state police of Florida, the ones that didn't stop the shooters and then blamed everyone else, along with their cronies, the FBI. They're communists, and they're peddling propaganda and psychological warfare. That's all they're good for. Now, do they enforce law? Of course. The Nazis enforced law. Soviet Union, they enforced law. They arrested thieves, certain thieves. Other thieves got to be thieves. But they also psychologically operated and tried to force people to crime. It's all the same. They're communists. They sold out long ago and tried to make themselves the heroes of the world over and over again. Very easily could have been somebody in the CIA that caused COVID-19. They were a little too quick to point at certain things for a simple answer. There's just no evidence to say they have any information that says anything other than what they said in 2018, which makes it a debit. It's actually, based upon them saying that, based upon their history of how they do the deep state business, them bringing up an issue in the Wuhan lab in the Trump administration time period when they were feeling the heat actually is a debit as far as exonerating them. Because that's how propaganda and psychological warfare would move prior to the activity. Well, we're the ones that were trying to save you from that. They do this all the time when they create sexual offenders, when they create mass shooters. We're the ones trying to save you from this. If you would only let us do more of this, we would have less of it. And then you have more of it, don't you? You have more crime. You have more sexual offending. You have more mass shooters. Why? Because they're creating them out of thin air, using psychological methods in open community to include psychological torture. Well, stay peaceful. Praise God in all that you do. Praise God.